Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I have to tell you, when I heard Jason Morgan was coming back to Port Charles, I thought, well, here we go. Things are about to get interesting because whenever Jason comes back, it's usually not just another day at General Hospital. It's an event. It's the kind of return that makes longtime fans sit up, grab their coffee, and say, all right, let's see what Stone Cold is bringing this time. But after watching how things have unfolded, I have to admit something feels different. The excitement that I expected doesn't seem as loud as it used to be. And that got me thinking about a question that many General Hospital fans are asking right now. Is Steve Burton really bringing Jason Morgan back with the same fire we've always known? Or does it feel like he's simply stepping back into the role because it's familiar? Now, before anyone misunderstands me, I want to make something clear. I have a lot of respect for Steve Burton. This man helped make Jason Morgan one of the most recognizable characters in daytime television. For years, he gave fans unforgettable moments, the loyalty to Sonny, the sacrifices for his family, the complicated relationships, and the quiet emotional scenes where Jason didn't need many words because his actions said everything. That's what made Jason special. He was never the loudest guy in the room. He wasn't the person giving long speeches or trying to prove himself every 5 minutes. Jason was the guy who walked into a situation, looked around, and you knew something serious was about to happen. Like folks say, when Jason Morgan shows up, you better pay attention. But this time around, I'm hearing a lot of fans say they're not feeling that same spark. And as someone who has followed the show for a long time, I can understand why some viewers are struggling with this return. The truth is, Jason Morgan's comeback happened after a very complicated period. Earlier this year, Steve Burton stepped away from filming for several months to focus on his personal life. Of course, actors are human beings first, and everyone deserves time away when they need it. But from a storytelling perspective, the timing created a problem. Jason was finally entering a really interesting chapter, especially with Britt Westbourne. I remember watching those scenes and thinking, now this is the Jason we haven't seen in a while. There was something refreshing about seeing him with Britt. It wasn't just another story about danger, revenge, or protecting someone from a threat. It felt like Jason was beginning to discover a different version of himself. For so many years, Jason has been trapped by the life he chose. He was always the protector, the fixer, the person everyone called when things went wrong. But with Britt, we saw the possibility that maybe Jason could have something else. Maybe he could have happiness. Maybe he could have a relationship where he wasn't constantly sacrificing himself for everyone around him. And then, just when fans started becoming invested in that story, Jason disappeared. That's where many viewers felt disappointed. It wasn't just that the character left. It was that he left when the emotional connection was building. Fans had questions. They wanted answers. They wanted to know what would happen next between Jason and Britt. Instead, they were left waiting. And now that Jason is back, some people are wondering if too much time has passed. Has the excitement faded? Has Port Charles moved on without him? Because let's be honest, General Hospital has not been quiet while Jason was away. This town has been overflowing with chaos. We've had WSB secrets, dangerous enemies, family betrayals, emotional battles, and enough shocking twists to make anyone say, good grief, these people never get a break. Port Charles has changed, and that means Jason's return has a bigger challenge than simply walking through the door. He has to prove why he is still an important part of this world. Some critics have even suggested that Steve Burton's performance feels less energetic than before. They believe his repeated departures and returns have affected the connection between the actor, the character, and the audience. For some longtime viewers, it feels like they're watching a version of Jason that isn't fully invested. And I can see why people are talking about it. When you have a character as iconic as Jason Morgan, fans have very high expectations. They don't just want to see the actor standing there and saying the lines. They want to feel that emotional weight again. They want to see the intensity, the loyalty, the pain, and the complicated heart that made Jason who he is. At the same time, I think we also have to look at Jason's story from another angle. Maybe Jason isn't supposed to come back as the same man we knew years ago. Think about everything he has endured. The man has lost people he loved. He has been separated from his family. He has lived through danger that would break most people. Recently, we even saw how much trauma he carried after his time connected to the WSB. A person doesn't go through all of that and simply walk back into town unchanged. Maybe the tired look, the quieter personality, and the different energy are actually showing us a wounded Jason Morgan, a man who is still trying to figure out where he belongs. And honestly, that could become a very interesting story if General Hospital chooses to explore it. Because the most fascinating thing about Jason was never just the action or the danger. It was always the human side underneath everything. The man who looked like he had no emotions but actually cared more deeply than almost anyone. But the question remains, will fans give this version of Jason a chance? That's the big mystery right now, because a comeback isn't successful just because a familiar face returns. A comeback works when the audience feels something, when they look at the screen and say, yes, this is why I missed this character. For Jason Morgan, that emotional connection is everything. And I think General Hospital has one important job ahead. Remind viewers why they love Jason in the first place. Not just because he's a legend, not just because he's been around for decades, but because behind the tough exterior, behind the silence, behind the reputation of Stone Cold, there has always been a man with a complicated heart. Now we have to wait and see if this new chapter can bring that magic back. Because in Port Charles, anything can happen, but even legends have to earn their place again. And now the big question everyone seems to be asking is, what happens next for Steve Burton and Jason Morgan? I have to admit, this is the part that really has me curious. Because when a character like Jason comes back, you expect fireworks. You expect the whole town of Port Charles to react. You expect old enemies to worry, old friends to celebrate, and new problems to appear almost immediately. But this time the return feels much more quiet, almost too quiet. And that's why some fans are wondering what Steve Burton's real plans are moving forward. Does he have a major storyline waiting around the corner? Is General Hospital slowly building towards something bigger for Jason? Or are we looking at a version of Jason who is no longer the main player, but instead someone watching the chaos happen around him? Because let's face it, Port Charles has changed a lot. There was a time when Jason Morgan was right in the middle of everything. If Sonny Corinthos was in trouble, Jason was there. If someone needed protection, Jason was there. If there was a dangerous situation nobody else could handle, people knew exactly who to call. But now the landscape is different. There are new threats, new alliances, and younger characters stepping into the spotlight. The show has created so many dramatic storylines that Jason's presence almost feels like one piece of a much bigger puzzle rather than the entire picture. And for longtime viewers like me, that's a strange feeling. I grew up watching Jason be the man who carried so much responsibility on his shoulders. He was the guy who would sacrifice his own happiness to keep everyone else safe. So seeing him return and not immediately become the center of attention feels unusual. But maybe that's exactly the point. Maybe General Hospital isn't trying to bring back the old Jason Morgan. Maybe the show is trying to show us what happens when a man who spent his whole life fighting finally has to face the question, who am I now? That's actually a story I would like to see. Because after everything Jason has been through, it wouldn't make sense for him to simply walk back into town and act like nothing happened. He has changed. He has scars. He has lost years of his life. And perhaps Steve Burton's quieter performance is reflecting that. Still, I understand why some fans are impatient. They waited a long time for Jason's return, and they want that emotional payoff. They want the big moments. They want the scenes that remind them why Jason Morgan became such a beloved character. Nobody wants to see a legend just standing in the background. As people say, you don't bring back a fan favorite just to let him sit on the sidelines. So now the pressure is on Steve Burton and the writers of General Hospital. They have to find the right balance. They have to respect Jason's history while also giving him something meaningful to do in the present. Maybe there's a major secret coming. Maybe there's a new threat that will force Jason back into action. Maybe there's unfinished business with Britt, Sonny, or the WSB that will remind everyone why Jason is still such an important part of Port Charles. I wouldn't count him out just yet. Because if there's one thing I've learned after years of watching General Hospital, it's that this show loves surprises. Characters can disappear, stories can change, and just when you think someone's chapter is over, they find a way to come back stronger. So for now, I'm keeping my eyes on Jason Morgan. I want to see where Steve Burton takes this next chapter. Maybe the quiet return is only the beginning of something much bigger. At the end of the day, Jason doesn't need to prove he's a legend. Fans already know that. But he does need a story that reminds everyone why they cared so much in the first place. And I have a feeling Port Charles isn't finished with Jason Morgan yet. Not by a long shot.